All right. Hey, there's a lot of people here. That's awesome.
It's really awesome.
So I'm Leigh Targaryen,
And I'm Jay Targaryen.
and it's so nice to see everybody here for the virtual Balticon 54. You guys are tuning into cosplay posing tips and tricks. We're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation of, different elements of doing cosplay photography, posing. And then at the very end of the presentation, we will open up to questions. You are welcome to put those questions in the Q&A, but we won't address them until the end of the presentation.
Cool. Yeah, we're super sorry that we have to do it in this format. We normally we'd be decked out in full costume and seeing all of your wonderful faces, but given the circumstances this year, this is still an awesome way to reach out and kind of chat with all you guys. So without further ado, I think we'll get started on the presentation. Okay, and it kills there we are. So I can always see. Cool, okay. So once again, welcome and thank you for coming for cosplay posing tips and tricks. We'll just be going through a lot of basics at first, and then we'll start to get into like the nitty gritty of posing and really like putting your best foot forward in your photographs. This was actually shot at Balticon. I had a friend of ours, Lauren Sisselman, took that photo of us.
Or Baltimore Lauren,
yes.
If you want to go by her photography name. And yeah, we did a little shoot outside by the Constellation. And I guess this was from 2 years ago?
Yes, it was super hot outside, Baltimore in the summer and all that. But loved how these photos turned out. And yeah, love those costumes. If you guys are watching the masquerade tonight, we actually are hosting the masquerade in those. So it's a lot of fun.
It's at 8 o'clock.
Sorry. There we go. So getting started just in, you've got the costume obviously, but you're like, man, the selfies aren't cutting it. I really want to get something better, something to look good on Facebook or Tumblr or Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, whatever your social media of choice is. And there's a few main things that you have to look at. You obviously want to find the right photographer. You want to prepare your poses beforehand. Scouting locations is very, very important, and just generally what you should be bringing with you besides yourself, the photographer, and costume. So I love that photo, by the way. Finding the right photographer. You always want to check with others who've worked with them. And ask the important questions of, did the photographer make them feel comfortable? You want to make sure that their style matches what you're looking for. One of our friends, Corwin, is an amazing photographer, does great action shots and has a real talent with lighting, but I don't know if I would go to him for other things. And we know a lot of photographers, so we're able to play to their strengths. And Leigh mentioned earlier when we were setting all this up, one of the biggest things is really you want to make sure that that photographer is at least kind of familiar.
Yeah, there's different ways that you can meet photographers. The most common at a convention is, someone comes up and they're like, hey, can I get your photo? And build a rapport from there. But, if you're, really serious about finding, that perfect photographer, you might go and do a little bit of research and check out their photography pages and, figure out whether or not that's the style that you want. And again, you would reach out to other cosplayers or models that have worked with that photographer, just to make sure that they're the right person. I know there was one photographer that I worked with, M9 Cosplay, and I had a couple models actually email me and say, hey, I saw that you worked with this guy. How did you feel about your photography session with him? And my response was, he's amazing. But at the end of the, photo shoot session, my body was like absolutely dead from doing the poses that he expected, because he really liked doing a lot of dynamic poses, and it required a lot more out of me than a normal photo shoot session would be. And then there's other questionable things. You know, there have been photographers that have done things that are inappropriate, not to me, but to some of our friends. And, you know, as, you know, people of this community, like, it's really important that, you know, make people aware of those type of photographers, so that you don't get yourself into an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but it does happen.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like going back to style wise, like if you're going for a certain element for your photograph, if you're doing a superhero, you want something that's dynamic and like, you know, very poppy. Or if it's something like more like fairies, you want something that's ethereal and you know, you want to try to, you know, pick something that's going to flow well with what it is that you're trying to convey in your picture. And it's also really important to make sure that that photographer is at least familiar with the series that you are costuming from, because they're not going to be able to help you out. Like, you might have a very specific pose in mind and you go to strike it, and then they might take that pose from the wrong angle, and then it doesn't come out as you see it, you know, from the series.
Okay. I have to click on that. There we go. So it's always really good to prepare your poses beforehand. Collaborate with your photographer if anything that you're trying to recreate, and make sure it's feasible. Definitely the more complex poses, because we know sometimes the anime or the video game or, you know, historical Renaissance picture doesn't always translate to something that's necessarily doable in real life. So try to practice it, see if you can get that desired effect without, you know, literally bending over backwards. You know, the more ideas, the better. Come prepared with dozens, just because, you know, the one that you might have your heart set on just might not work out, unfortunately. We've had that happen plenty of times, where the one we planned was like, oh, this is going to look great. Every photo, it just, you know, something's off and weird about it.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely practice in front of a mirror. You can get a cheap floor-length mirror at IKEA. You can get one at Walmart, even hang up on the wall. And they go a really long way just to making sure you're getting the look that you want.
And I really want to reiterate the practice in your costume. Like, you can practice your poses without the costume, but then when you put the costume on, you'll find that there are more restrictions put on you. What, like, for example, if you were to be wearing armor or a corset, you wouldn't be able to maneuver yourself quite in the way that you could if you were unhindered by those elements. The other thing is with poses, like, make sure it's something that you're physically capable of. I'm a dancer, so there's a lot more that I can do that maybe, say, Jay can't.
There's a lot I can't do.
You know, and with that being said, I did a photo shoot around this time last year of Spider-Gwen on point shoes. I've done not millions of years, but that would make me very old. But I've done point since I was 12. So I have a lot of experience. I also teach professionally. And we were in the middle of the photo shoot. And the photographer, like, kind of looked on, we were in my dance studio, and he looked at the back wall and he saw this dancer with her leg like up to her ear. And he says to me, "Hey, Leigh, think you can do that?" And I'm like, well, not as young as I used to be, but I'm still pretty flexible. I can try, but I'm going to have to kick my leg up there. I'm not going to be able to, like, develop it up like I used to. I don't have the strength as I used to have. And when I went to kick my leg up, my bottom leg, being on point shoes, and if you guys know that those are like satiny, on the floor went whoop, and I went down, and I caught myself, and the reverberations went up, and I broke my elbow.
we got to sit in an emergency room for 5 hours, but she's good now. And it's great because the photo shoot actually turned out really, really well. And there's a photo of it later in the presentation you can see of before that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, no, that photo was after it happened.
Oh,
because
you can't tell on her face.
I'm a crazy person, and even after I got hurt, I wanted to finish my photo shoot session. Please don't do that. If you get hurt during a photo shoot session, you should stop and address whatever injury it is that you do incur. But you know, practicing those poses ahead of time and checking with the photographer will absolutely help in your safety. And you know, because that photo that he wanted was a spur of the moment type of pose, so I wasn't prepared for it. Also, if you aren't a dancer or martial artist, please don't try to do backflips or other crazy maneuvers that you've never tried before. Please try to keep your own limitations in mind as you're going through that. And open dialogue with the photographer is always a great idea when you start that communication with them, sending photos ahead of time, being like, you know, this is what I'm going for, and they can be like, oh yeah, that's definitely feasible. I can do this with my lighting, I can do this with my angling, that type of thing would be a really good idea. And they can even bounce things back to you as well.
So next, scouting locations. Yeah, I cannot see because your hair.
Sorry, I'm trying to read the question that somebody has.
So a lot of us know what that is. That is the legendary gazebo at the Gaylord in the National Harbor, DC. There's been a lot of jokes about it. When you go to Katsicon, this thing is actually roped off and it's like monitored to keep crowds down because the cosplayers swarm this thing. Not really sure why. I've never had a costume that I was like, man, that would look the best if it was inside of a gazebo in a hotel. But, you know, to each their own. At the cons, you definitely want to be familiar with the congested areas of the convention. You don't want to plan your photo shoot right outside of the dealer's room entrance or in a main tracked hallway. We always get stopped at various conventions, and what we'll actually do is ask the photographer to pull over to the side with us because the center aisle is absolutely no place to have a photo taken. You're in everybody's way. The photos are not going to turn out right, and it's not going to work out for any of the parties involved. And as someone who works for conventions, you have to worry about fire codes too. Those big photo shoots you see, I help run some of those, and we actually have to allocate those to a very specific area because if not, the hotel will give us trouble. Mm-hmm. If you're doing things out of the convention, you always want to make sure that you check the policies with the location, make sure that professional photography is allowed. You know, if you don't want to get all dressed up, do all the makeup, plan everything with the photographer, get to the, you know, the garden or wherever you're having this, and security tell you, you know, you got to go because professional photography isn't allowed. And I mean, you can try to do it in a very guerrilla, sneaky way, but it's going to really stink when you get thrown out before you even got done your photo shoot. So, and do definitely just look online, look on their websites. Some places do it completely free. Some of them do require a small fee. One place that we love is it Ledoux, Ledoux Gardens. And I think it's a very small fee, and there's no restrictions really, as long as you're not bringing in tons and tons of equipment. Mm-hmm. Lots of pretty natural backgrounds. So, and you know, parks are another good place. You pay the $3 to get in, and as long as you're not obstructing anybody or anything, you can usually shoot to your heart's content.
Yeah, funny story. I was working with Corwin. It was our first photo shoot outside of the convention, and we were shooting Supergirl. And I thought, man, the rooftop of the garage in Towsontown would be really cool. Like it kind of looks like a Kryptonian building. You know, it's like kind of crystallized and domey. And I was like, that would be really neat to do a shoot up there. So we get out of the car, and he takes like maybe like 10 pictures, and like the mall security cop comes like wheeling around like really quickly up there, and is just like, what are you doing up here? And we're like, we're doing photos and that's not allowed. And I'm like, sorry. So like we have a couple from that shoot, but like we didn't know that that wasn't a place that you could do photography, as a parking lot. So you never know where you might run into some trouble like that. So always be prepared to have backup options in case your first option is not available to you for whatever reason.
So what to bring with you? Because you know you've got the costume, you've got your photographer. He's obvious, or she's obviously got their camera. But what else should you be bringing with you? And this is just a little checklist of things that we usually run down whenever we have photo shoots. You always want to make sure you have bottled water or a container of water, just something to keep hydrated, especially during the late spring and summer months. You know, photo shoots, some can last 30 minutes. We've done some that lasted 4 or 5 hours. There's a place in Baltimore City called the Graffiti Warehouse where she did, actually with M9 photography, great photo shoot. I accompanied her, not to be part of the photo shoot, but just to, you know, be a chaperone, I guess is the word. The warehouse was not air conditioned. There was no airflow through this warehouse. And I remember, and I didn't think at that time, because this was years ago, to bring things like snacks and water. I brought like my sketchbook and 3 comic books and proceeded to try to read those and draw on a very sweaty leather couch behind a big sign that said Rumspringa, because the other things go on in that warehouse. But yeah, so water. Extra nylons, if that applies to your costume, because nothing looks worse than a big old run in your brand new nylons. And we've done posing where I've done lifts with her and torn a brand new pair of nylons, and she loves me for that. But
it's happened like probably 6 or 7 times.
I'm really good at it, apparently. Always bring backup makeup, you know, mirror, hairspray, bobby pins, safety pins. Emergency cosplay repair kit is super important. We always pack one of those. It's a little briefcase that we've put together. Some conventions, if you're at, they do actually have cosplay repair stations nowadays. I run one at MagFest to great success. We also have a cosplay repair ferry that floats around the convention and does mobile repairs. But if you're out on just a photo shoot on an off weekend, you definitely want to make sure you pack needle and thread, glue gun, stuff like that. And it's funny, I do Jester Lavore from Critical Role, which is all blue makeup, and I wear it to Ren Fair and to outdoor festivals, not just conventions, and I will carry my aqua color and a little bit of like a little bottle of water so I can do touch-ups all day, because it looks awesome and I need to show it off. Always make sure you have an emergency medical kit, you know, just Band-Aids, Tylenol, that sort of thing. And really the most important thing, bring a friend. You know, you might need a chaperone if it's a new photographer, but even if it's not, if it's, you know, one of your best friends and somebody you're really familiar with, you might need them. I've held lights for photo shoots with Corwin before. I've also been the cape flapper, and she has as well. So it's yeah, it's a fun job.
And usually it's rather entertaining to like watch, and sometimes you get roped into doing the photo with them at some point. There was a Mermaid shoot that I did, and the photographer actually got a really nice picture of Jay carrying me to the waterfall, and it's really cool. Like, it wasn't something that we had planned or intended, but
it was a neat happenstance. So I love this photo. This was taken at the Cherry Blossom Festival in DC a few years ago. I had no idea they were doing that behind me. You can see I was very intense and doing my Dynasty Warriors pose, and they're all just being clowns in the background. I love all those people. But so you're at the photo shoot, and you've got your prepare bag and everything. So what comes next? First thing you want to do, and it sounds a little silly, but you'll always make sure you stretch. When we do this panel live, we actually make the audience get up and stretch. Since we can't see you guys right now, we're not going to make you do that.
Yeah, it's not as fun because we can't see you.
That is just us stretching in front of a camera. But and I got this sorry, pointing at the camera like you can see my screen. But I got this thing from the show How Heavy Are My Dumbbells I Lift? Great Japanese anime. But they one episode dedicate an entire episode to dynamic stretching, and how using these stretches and others that you can find online and in books really, really help much more than your typical like stretch that we all used to do before gym class when we would go running or whatever.
And what Jay's talking about is an isometric stretch, which is something that you hold for a long period of time, which is not effective if you're not warm. You want your body to be warm before you go through the process of like, you know, stretching those muscles out. If the muscles are cold, you're going to wind up doing something, you know, that could damage yourself, at least on the short term, if not for the long term. So just be mindful of that. But stretching is absolutely important, even after the photo shoot is done. Believe it or not, like holding poses, I think is a little bit more difficult than performing a dance. Like, and that's coming from somebody who has been dancing their entire life. I've been more sore from photo shoots than I have from doing a 3-hour dance performance, or even after I ran a marathon. So it just depends on, I guess, like what poses you're doing. Maybe I'm just doing really crazy things during my photo shoots. You might not be as unfortunate, but it's better to be prepared and to have yourself nice and warm before you go into it.
Mm-hmm. So moving into more just examples now of different types of photographs, different posing, things like that. This first one, this is a wonderful photo shoot Leigh did with a gentleman by the name of Francisco, where it was a various, what was it, dance attire, Leigh? And he was working with this reflective surface. And what's really, really cool about this photo is it's not only what she's doing in the reflection of what she's doing, but you really have to pay attention to the negative space around her and that movement of that scarf. There's a whole lot of dynamic things going on here.
Yeah, so this shoot was really challenging. So basically, there was plexiglass on the ground, and he had 2 giant pieces, but there was a seam because you can't get that big of a piece of plexiglass. And so what he told me was, he's like, when you're posing, be mindful of the seam, because if you get to a weird place on the seam, then it will create like this weird double face or double foot thing on the reflection. And my friend Amanda was with me, and her job in the photo shoot, she had the camera next to her, and she had to like look at every picture and like, you know, make sure that I didn't have like this weird double face phenomenon happening.
It's a weird little vacuum that happened.
Yeah, it's very strange. So in this shoot, and it's not cosplay, but it could absolutely be translated into some sort of cosplay. The reason why I wanted to show it was, like, you know, he was telling me as I was posing to see if I could imagine what the negative space around my body and the reflection would create. And we were trying to create like some sort of like images from that. And then using the scarf with the movement, like we had a fan going to give it movement, but it actually made it more challenging. So I did that without a fan. And that's a silk scarf that's hand dyed by my friend Nina. But yeah, just a couple like ideas that you can have for photography. It doesn't necessarily have to be just a straight on shot of you and your cosplay. Like if there is something that has to do with, you know, reflections, like if you're doing a character that's really into mirrors, like maybe Sailor Neptune.
Castlevania stuff.
Yeah, Castlevania. There's a lot of fun things you could do with reflections and negative space.
So remember that mermaid photo shoot we were talking about? This is one of the photos. I apologize, it's a little blurry. I was just pulling it from Instagram. But this was a state park down south of Baltimore. I don't know the exact location. We met up with our photographer friend, Casey, and they took us on a little bit of a trip to this park. And then what was fun was it was about, what, 30-minute walk, Leigh, to this location. And it was this beautiful little waterfall with a lagoon underneath of it. And, you know, it's middle of the day, people are walking through, going on hikes, they've got kids. And as we're shooting this, every couple of minutes or so, you just hear a kid squeal and then go, mermaid! But it was a lot of fun. This was a lot of me wading through the water with my pants rolled up to my ankles because I don't own shorts.
To your knees.
To my knees. But yeah, I don't own shorts. So I'm wading through the water, and like for that one, I actually helped prop her up on the rock because, as you can see in the mermaid tale, she doesn't exactly have access to her feet. But it was, and really Casey found that location, not us. And it ended up being this perfect, you can't tell that's a park versus, some like Mermaid Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
So, and try to fit it to the character that you're doing. If you're doing something more medieval Renaissance-y, you might be able to work with a photographer going to like Renaissance Festival in Maryland or Virginia. Lots of nice forests. If you're doing something a little more urban, like we mentioned, the graffiti warehouse is really cool for like some of the superhero shots.
You can even like go, you don't have to like, sometimes you have to like book the graffiti warehouse. They have a meet and greet on I think it's the second Saturday of the month. And you can meet a lot of different photographers and they do a theme, but you could just bring whatever cosplay you wanted and they can shoot you for that. There's like a small fee for that. Or you could shoot outside. Like they have the outside area open to whoever wants to go. And there's just a ton of like cool graffiti that like just constantly changes. So if you're looking for something like that, that's really nice.
Do you want to tell your story about what happened at Graffiti Warehouse though? Nothing bad, just a bad
I do. So this actually was at one of the meet and greets. It was a pinup theme and I had like my hair all nice and I was in like one of my 50s style dresses and the photographer pulled me over and he's like, hey, I'd like to get some shots of you. And I didn't think to look at the graffiti behind me that I was standing in front of. I assumed that the photographer had already scouted that location because I had seen them like taking pictures of other models over there. And I thought, okay, well, that should be a fine place to go. And the photographer sends me the images the next day and like, everything that I was doing looked great. The photography looked great. And I look behind myself and there's this giant fairy that has no pants on
or underpants
or
anything else
like it just was like there's genitalia, there it is,
all over
there it is right behind my head, like just right here. And I'm like, well, I can't use those photos.
Nope.
And like, it's kind of a thing, like if a photographer does photos for you, you really shouldn't edit their photos unless you ask them. And I felt kind of weird asking that photographer to remove
the fairy.
Remove the fairy. I mean, maybe they really like that fairy. So I just quietly just deleted my pictures and was very sad about it. But
we tried to find it today to share, but unfortunately it is gone.
Yeah, I got rid of it.
Showcase your costume. So you spent hours and hours and hours making the costume, or if you didn't make your costume, point being, you want to showcase the costume. We love to see your face, but the reason you're having this photo shoot is to show off what you're wearing and to be in character. And this is to, I didn't know Mermaid. This is two examples. This was also shot at the Gaylord in DC of Leigh's Mercy costume from Overwatch. And great photographer, our friend Rick, but he was going for something really artsy on the right side, whereas we were just trying to showcase the costume on the left. And you could really see the difference between the two. The one on the right of her crouched down in the brush there is a really cool photo, but you can't see her costume. You can see her head and the hat and the scarf, and that's about it. Cool photo, but you definitely want to make sure that you at least get some more like the left one where you can see all that, detailed leather work that she did and all the warble and stuff like that. Because we know how much time goes into this, so you don't want to get home and realize, oh, I have nothing, just that shows off my craftsmanship. Mm-hmm. So, highlight the details. Leigh, I'll let you talk about this one.
Okay, so this White Queen costume that I made is probably the most detail-oriented costume I've ever done, and probably the one that I poured the most energy into. There's just a lot of elements to it, down to hand beading. I created the trim from scratch, like I knitted that. I put on a ton of crystals on it. Like there's just a lot of things happening with this costume. And, you know, I wanted to make sure that I got a lot of different angles of the costume because I wanted to preserve the element of what, you know, I had done here. And so when you get your costume photographed, this is obviously an archive for yourself. And you want to make sure that you get all angles of your costume, and make sure that you tell the photographer, hey, I worked really hard on this particular part of the costume. Can you please make sure that there's a shot showcasing that element of that costume? And usually they're really good about acquiescing to that. But don't forget that, like, you know, oftentimes cosplayers forget about the back. Like you do a lot of things in the back as well as the front, and you need to make sure that you get different angles of the costume.
Utilizing props. So in this particular picture, this is Snake from Metal Gear Solid 3. You can obviously have that big old airsoft gun, that thing, full metal and wood, really, really cool. I spent a stupid fortune on it that I probably shouldn't have. But you want to make sure that, especially for a prop that you didn't make, you don't want it to overwhelm your photo. You want to be able to use that prop, and that prop should help enrich the photo that you have, like as here. It's definitely, you know, it's a center point to what I'm doing, but your eyes don't automatically focus on that, but rather take in the full picture. You know, with the Mercy photo we looked at before, she definitely had the broom, she had the gun, but it wasn't the focal point of it. We want to see you and your face in your costume most of the time.
Okay, dynamic posing.
This is what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Her arm was broken there.
Yeah, you can't tell my arm was broken. So yeah, this was a really awesome jump that I did. You know, it's a lot of fun to do dynamic posing, but it also takes a lot out of you. Again, like that kind of goes back to that whole make sure that you're warm, make sure that you've practiced this many times, that it is something that you're comfortable doing, and that it's safe for you.
Yeah, I can't do that. No matter how hard I try, I couldn't do that. That isn't Photoshop. She's up that high. Oh, and this one was fun. It's one I had to point out because I can't tell you how many pictures we've gotten done before, and you're like, oh my gosh, this looks so great. And then I'm guilty of putting my badge on my belt or somewhere lower, so it's not around my neck. But lo and behold, there's that badge swinging in the picture. And, you know, it kind of kills it a little bit. It's not the end of the world, but look how cute she looks in this photo as the Pokemon. And imagine how much cuter she would look if she didn't have the big MagFest badge hanging in front of the costume. It's a little thing, but it's funny. A lot of photographers, when we shoot, will go do our pose and they'll bring the camera up and go, oh, wait, badge. But also make sure that you're either giving your badge to a friend, someone you trust, the photographer, or tucking it away on your own person. Do not lay them on the ground. People will pick them up and take them, and they are expensive to replace. So I've ran that side of things for conventions before, where you're trying to help a cosplayer who has just sat their badge down and some less than savory individual has picked it up. So next we want to look at some kind of like do's and don'ts of photography. Forgive, some of these are a little odd. We shot them in our house, and the best lighting in the house was actually in that stairwell.
It's not even great lighting, so
work with us.
But I wore dance attire just so that it's easier to see the lines of the body and you understand like how the differences are. So in this first set, you're looking at angling, and you'll notice that if you want yourself to appear slimmer, then you're going to want to angle yourself a little bit at catty corner to one side or the other. But if you want to look imposing and you want to look, you know, wide and strong, then you would put yourself square to the camera.
Superhero stances always look best when you're squared up like that. Booster Gold and Green Lantern were a couple I did years ago, and those kind of like hands on hip, broad shoulder always look really good. I do this.
Yeah. Don't press your body parts close to your body. If you notice on the picture on the left, I have my right arm really like pushed into my body, and then on the one on the right, I don't. And you can just see how much wider my arm looks from one to the other. And it's just an angle, but it could you know, make or break the way that you look at the photo itself.
Ballet hands. This is something she knows all too well. She
Yeah.
says it to me all the time when we're doing photos because I like to be a little more rigid.
Yeah, so when you have your hands visible, it's really important not to, like, you don't want to get hamburger hands. You don't want to have like stiff jazz hands. You want to just have like a relaxed, but like energy through your fingers. So like ballet hands, this is how I teach my students. You take your middle finger and your thumb and you bring them together. It kind of looks like Quiet Coyote, but minus the other finger. And then you just release those and keep the middle finger dropped ever so slightly, and you want to keep your thumb dropped. Don't stick your thumbs out because then you look like you're like doing some hand jive thing. So it's just like, it just gives some life to your hands. If you stick your fingers together, you look very robotic. So you just want to have something going on with the hands.
And this is actually even a trick, as I do a little bit of drawing, and this is a trick I employ just in my artwork, is rather than just have that hand out like this, you have it a little more calm. It's a little harder to draw, but the end result is much, much better. Worm's eye versus bird's eye. You might have heard this term before. It's an old photography hat term. Worm's eye means what it would look like from down on the ground, i.e. what if a worm was looking up at you, versus a bird's eye, which means up in the air and looking down upon the target. Funny story, we were at DragonCon about 5 or 6 years ago, Leigh.
This is such a good story.
And we were staying at the Steampunk Hotel of DragonCon, and we left one morning, and I was in Green Arrow, and I think you were dressed as Sailor Moon.
No, I was Black Canary.
Oh, you Black Canary, sorry.
Yeah.
And we're waiting at a light, waiting for the light to change so we can cross the street. And we look over, and there is the musician, Professor Elemental, who is one of our absolute favorite musicians. Check him out if you haven't heard of him. But he does like a steampunk British hip hop thing. And he got really, really excited. He's a comic book fan. And he goes, "Oh, look at you guys. You dressed up like the Green Arrow. You know what's even better about this?" And I had like the mustache and the fake goatee because I can't grow anything. And he goes, "You see, if I take a picture up here, you look like you're all kind of homeless. And hey, mate, can I have $1? And then if I get down here," and referring to the worm's eye, it's like, "Oh, you kind of look like really dashing superhero, like you might go save the world or something." And trying to have him take these photos while explaining this to us, and I'm trying to keep that very serious superhero look. It didn't work out so well. I don't know what the photos looked like, but I'm pretty sure that I was laughing through my mustache and goatee.
Yeah, but like something else you'll notice from these different angles, from the worm's eye, you tend to look taller and longer, like my legs look super long, and then you look at from the bird's eye, and then you look much shorter and you know, not as long. So I tend to like the worm's eye much more than the bird's eye, but some instances the bird's eye is more significant for what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a very dynamic look.
It is.
Shadowing. So this one's hard to see, and I apologize. That is just, like I said, bad lighting in our house. But in the left picture, Leigh actually has her hand blocking. No, it's in the right picture. Leigh has her hand blocking the light out. So you can sort of see on the camera right now how I'm shading my own face with the light in the kitchen here. She's doing that in the photo. But when she just moves her hand slightly, it solves that problem. And actually, it's funny. It demonstrates better on the camera than it does even on the picture. But just make sure, be aware of the shadows that you're casting on yourself or in other members of the group if you're doing a group photo shoot. Yeah,
watch where your lighting source is. And I often try to angle my face towards where that lighting source is. You know, some photographers are awesome and they will have like all kinds of lighting equipment to make sure that there's not that problem happening, but sometimes they don't have the capability to have that. So.
Sometimes hotels don't allow that. The Gaylord oftentimes will, if you have more than just a basic light stick, they'll tell you to pack it up. So yeah, be cognizant of your surroundings. Foreshortening. This one's really, really fun and something else I employ in drawing as well. So you can see that objects that are closer to the camera obviously appear larger, which for certain things like fighting poses, for instance, create a really, really cool effect. There's a photographer, I don't know, I don't think he's in the business anymore, but EBK, who was always, one of his claims to fame was he loved to use foreshortening, to where if you had like Kratos from God of War, he had the, you know, the chain blade, and the photographer would hold one end of the blade and then shoot down the chain. So you would get this really cool effect of it looking like he was throwing the blade at the camera. Now the downside of that though is, as you can see in these photos, especially Leigh's foot is covering the majority of Leigh. Mm-hmm. So you have to take that in consideration as well, that if you want this effect, you might want to pivot a little bit to kind of offset the foreshortening. So it's not covering your entire face. Like you can see on the one on the left, Leigh's hand's actually a little bit in her face. And you know, if this was a real photo shoot, we would have had her move her hand down a little bit. Right?
Yep. And
you can also see our cat, Gigi.
Yes, he's posing rather nicely.
I'll let you talk about this one.
Okay, so the idea of being turned in or parallel versus turned out, again, it's the same idea as the angling concept. Where you're in parallel, it's going to make yourself have a smaller silhouette, whereas when you're turned out, a wider silhouette. And if you are going into a turned out position, just be mindful, because that there's a possibility, depending on what kind of costume you're wearing, it could be a large crotch shot. So turning into parallel is usually a more ladylike manner of posing. And again, here's another angling idea. I
don't think I spelled that right, sorry.
Definitely didn't spell that right. With this particular idea, like, so I've got my leg up, which is impressive in some sort of fashion, I guess. But if you're looking at me from the front, it doesn't really look like much. But when you turn to the side, you can actually see that my leg is lifted, and I'm doing something a little bit more exciting than just pointing my foot forward. Yeah,
just makes for a much more interesting photo, because that's really, and once again, it creates that negative space we were talking about as well. Whereas the foot that's pointed more towards the camera, you're getting this very linear middle of the image. Whereas she turns, it lets the eye move along a path of seeing the whole figure. So. Engaging muscles.
So I usually have a rule of, like, right before I know that the photographer is going to shoot, I just like engage everything that I possibly can. And you don't want to hold your breath, because that's a terrible idea. But just like, you know, it's like 1, 2, 3, ha! And you just like, you know, make sure that everything's nice and strong, because you can see the difference between the two. Like, you know, the top, I've got this nice bicep thing going on, and then the other one's like this very sad looking arm. And maybe, you know, if you're doing maybe a character that isn't super strong, that might be the way that you need to go. But if you're doing a superhero or someone else who is very athletic, you want to make sure that you're making your muscles as strong as they could possibly be.
Yeah, we usually have to get her arms checked with security at conventions because of the gun show that's going on there.
I have had piece bonded on my arm before.
Chin up, super easy one. You can definitely tell the difference here, and she's exaggerating a little bit in these photos, but just make sure you raise your chin. That's something that the photographers always yell at me about. You know, raise your chin, but not too high, because then you lose everything in the neck region. That's not flattering either.
Yeah, you have to find that nice middle ground. Because if you do this, then you wind up getting that weird double chin thing, and you also look like you don't have a neck. And then up here, like, you just, I don't know, it's just not good.
Not a desired effect.
Yeah.
Where are your eyes looking? So once again, this is a bit of an extreme. We're just trying to show.
So I look really crazy in the right side one, and I did that on purpose, like, because a lot of times, like, you know, the photographer might be like, hey, look to your right, and you look to the right with your eyes, but you look like all the way to the right, and then it just gets the whites of your eyes, and it's not super cute. So the idea is to, like, kind of look at a diagonal, just a little bit to one side of your nose. Like, and if you look at that small diagonal as opposed to an extreme side, you'll get the idea that you're looking to the side without looking super crazy, like I said before.
Yeah, and one of the tricks I always employ is whenever I'm doing photo shoots in general, I never look directly into the camera. Usually my eyes, I kind of do that look through the photographer thing to where my eyes are just focused slightly over the photographer's shoulder or something like that. And it creates a nicer effect because you're not just staring directly at the camera, giving it the crazy eye. How does she get pop your hip?
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of curves. I wish I did. So you do an illusion of curves by making extreme angles on your body. Again, that doesn't feel so good after a certain point. So, I wouldn't recommend doing those types of poses for very long. But if you notice the one side where my hip is not popped versus the one that I do have it popped, there's a bit of more of a curve happening.
And that's kind of all we had. Sorry, David S. Pumpkin is kind of one of my favorite things ever.
Take that off the share so then they can see.
Yes.
So there's a couple questions that we had from earlier. One of them was, why are we not in costume today? There's a multitude of reasons.
We scolded ourselves for it.
First of all, I woke up this morning, I had to teach a dance class, and I'm actually—
Show them your boot.
I'm in a boot because I hurt myself yet again. I'm a very accident-prone individual, if you guys aren't aware of that. This will be my second Balticon in a boot.
She performed it last time when she was in a boot. We did a Tangled skit on stage.
That's absolutely true.
And much like that skit, I've been carrying her through the house because climbing up and down stairs isn't easy on that thing. So when we did the skit, we also, I carried her on the stage, put her down, we did our little Billy, and then I picked her up and I carried her off stage.
Yeah, so my maneuverability is a little bit limited.
And getting into the costume even.
Well, yeah, there's that. But I taught, and then we wanted to participate in a Call of Cthulhu RPG game, which happened to be right after my dance class, and then it was backed up right into when we had to do this panel. So we didn't want to be in costume for 8 hours.
I mean, we do that at conventions, but
this is in our house with just us.
Plus,
like,
we have cats, and one of them's black and one of them's silver, and they will absolutely rub on everything. So it wouldn't have made it this far, not completely covered head to toe in cat hair.
Yeah, if you guys come to our tea party tomorrow, we will be in costume for that. So we do apologize for not being in costume for this.
Sorry.
And then the other question we had was, what are some of the reasons cosplayers want photo shoots? Is this a thing casual cosplayers should bother with, or is it useful mainly to competitive master level cosplayers who have cosplay businesses or get invited to conventions? My answer to that is, I feel like a photo shoot is absolutely an important element of your cosplay. It doesn't matter what level cosplayer you are, whether you made your costume, whether you bought it, whatever it is, you want documentation of you being in that costume. Like, no matter what you did, you put effort into putting that costume on, and you want to make sure that you have record of it. Mm-hmm. It's memories, and we don't sell our photos. It's basically just for us and to share with the world, like, hey, we did a thing. And it's kind of like the idea of creating art. Like, you just put your art out there, and some people appreciate it and some people don't. It's whatever it is. But the main point of cosplay is to have fun. Yep.
Yeah, we're not all the Jessica Nagiris and Yaya Hans of the world. We don't make money off of cosplay. The best we do is we get to guest and share our information with you guys. And we just like to have photos because we spent 8 hours looking kind of cool, and I want to look back at it.
And then another question we have, are there any poses in particular that are better for more flattering for fuller figure women? So I would say, like, I think everybody's body is beautiful and wonderful. So I say any pose is great, but if you're trying to go for a more slimming idea of your picture, I would say angle.
Yeah, angling is a big one.
Like I said earlier, like, if you turn yourself at an angle, it's going to give you a less profile than you are if you're facing front. And again, just don't press your body parts against yourself.
Any change in posing suggestions for males? I mean, it depends on what you're doing. This really works for any gender. These rundowns. You know, I've got some tough guy costumes I've done in the past. I did Jesse McCree from Overwatch. You know, we did that actually at the Balticon 2 years ago. And you know, square, like we talked about angling, like squaring up a little more in the photos. Because I don't know if you notice, I'm not a very threatening person, and looking tough is harder for me. But I usually manage to, when I do the tougher things, I try to square up. But then when I do my dresses and stuff, I can use the other tips. So
yeah, I would say like and using that bird's eye, I think tends to give a more masculine look.
Shows off the squared shoulders.
Whereas the worm's eye is better for. Okay, yeah, we could definitely have.
Next time we can definitely switch off and for the next presentation. We actually have to wrap up now. I'm sorry, we're getting the time warning. We're going to be moving over to Discord to chat with everyone for a little bit if you want. And when we're in Discord, we'll share all our information. We can share contacts. So if you can't make the Discord, just pop in at some point, grab our information. We're always happy to answer any questions, and we can absolutely share some other photos. We have things like that. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Definitely check out the masquerade at 8 o'clock tonight, and then tomorrow at 2 p.m. we are having our tea party, which will also be really, really fun. Thank you guys so much. Take care.